Have you ever felt hopeless? That's a really kind of vulnerable question. And we know that we need to be thinking positive. But the reality is, when you have been through really, really difficult times, hopelessness is a real feeling. Maybe you feel hopeless in a specific situation. Maybe you feel hopeless in being able to process your grief. Maybe you feel hopeless in life. Hopelessness is a feeling of like it's just too much. And I want to put this in context for all of us. My name's Christy Bundakumara. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, but in these videos, I share very vulnerably my own struggles and how I am mentally strong through those struggles. I started mentally strong after my son died in 2016, and I started sharing these videos. And even though I am a grief expert, I am doing this both professionally and personally. I have my moments, and we all will have our moments. So hopelessness is a place I was at for a short period of time a couple days ago. And it's important to note that a short period of time can just be part of the process. When you allow yourself to stay there, it can be dangerous, and you may need to seek professional help. So how do I get out of that feeling of hopelessness? I use what I teach as the Mentally Strong Method, and I'm going to go through my process of what I did to get myself out of that feeling of hopelessness. So I created the Mentally Strong Method as I was going through the trauma of my son's life. My son started having catastrophic epilepsy at age 6, and he died at age 16. And in the process of that, I was raising 5 other children and working and doing life. And I believed in cognitive behavioral therapy. I knew I needed to think positive. But boy, was it hard in the midst of that day-to-day. And sometimes it's still hard. So I'm going to share with you what the Mentally Strong Method is. It is a way to think through your problems, organize them, and make choices in line with what you really want. And it starts with a thought map. And this is my thought map. It's kind of messy. When I teach it, it looks a lot prettier. But this is just truly when I'm in a space of negativity, I get out and I do a thought map. And so a couple days ago, I was feeling hopeless. And the first question you ask yourself, and I want you to ask yourself this now: what makes you feel hopeless right now? Maybe you even get out a piece of paper and write these things down. You don't have to put the details. Unlike journaling, where you're putting all your private details on paper, a thought map, you can just put initials. You know what that is. I don't have to share the details of what's going on in my life right now to share the vulnerability of where I feel, right? And so these things are going on in my life. And what I realized when I got them down on paper, what they all had in common was results. That I was not happy with the results. Like that I was working really hard to do such and such or to help so and so. And the results were not what I wanted or what I was proud of. And then the next question that you ask in a thought map is, when have you felt like that in the past? When did you feel hopeless in the past? And there has been many, many, many times around DRPLA, DRPLA, which is the acronym for the rare neurodegenerative condition that Reggie, Maya, and Bundy all had. There was multiple times of feeling hopeless, trying to save Reggie, trying to stop his seizures. And he just kept getting worse and progressing. And it was a 10-year battle with positivity versus negative results, right? I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be positive. I am doing what the doctors say. I'm doing more research. I'm taking him all around the world to all kinds of treatments, and just wasn't getting the results. And he ultimately died. Maya, which was more of a traumatic death because she was not sick, even though she had DRPLA, she died in her sleep, and that was traumatic. And it makes you feel hopeless to even the positives. right? Like I had come to terms with the fact that I probably was not, outside of a miracle from God, Maya was going to succumb to DRPLA. But she was not sick. Her seizures were well controlled. I thought I had 10, 20 years. And I was doing what everyone says and thinking positive and spending time with Maya and being joyous that she was still here and such a beautiful soul. And then she dies in her sleep. So you can see how, like, even when I was succumbing to the reality and not fighting it like I did with my son, I still get punched in the face, punched in the gut. That's what her death felt like. My husband's death, although he was on hospice and we knew it was coming, it wasn't the punch in the gut like Maya's. It was the final straw of you can't win. No matter how hard you try, you can't win. So you can see how this past of DPLA is impacting the current situation of not getting the results that I want, right? Then you also ask yourself, like back in your childhood, did you ever feel hopeless? And I don't know that I really felt the magnitude of hopelessness, but I do remember very distinctly wanting a father to love me, right? I didn't have a father for the first 9 years of my life. My father adopted me when I was 9. It didn't feel like I expected it to feel. I gave my life to God at a certain point and, wanted that love, like just wanting the love. And then that goes to my next thing of how this impacts your spiritual relationship is because of the hardship and the pain that God has allowed me to go through, I really, really, really struggle with feeling God's love. I think that love is protection, right? I try to protect the people that I love. I do not want the people that I love to hurt. But that is not my story. That is not my journey, right? And so here we have this all on paper of where this hopelessness comes from. Now, if you sit and just ruminate in this negative, you could want to hurt yourself. You could really believe that this life is hopeless. Do not stop there. You've got to organize these things so that you can process them differently, separately. After a thought map, we go into what we call identify and organize and power of choice. You get to choose how you respond. You get to choose how you process. And so, if you look here, I just kind of scribbled down the different categories and I'll talk about my power of choice. Core connection is something that goes super deep, started in childhood, and is still impacting you today. And I realized through doing this map that the hopelessness I felt 3 days ago actually goes so deep of feeling unlovable, right? From not having a father to, God not loving me. And I do believe that God loves me. And I also want to be true and vulnerable in the process that it takes to get me there. And then it is not specifically what I learned in church. And I continue to call my spiritual relationship God because that is what I'm comfortable with. But I encourage everyone to seek out this spiritual relationship because it is really hard to navigate this world without a belief in eternity. So that was my core connection. Another thing that I realized in doing this thought map, and this is why thought maps are so profound. I've been doing thought maps on myself for 10 plus years, and I learned something new. What I learned is that not getting the results that I want in any situation is a trigger for me. Now, triggers are not to be fixed. They are to be managed. You will always get triggered by something. And so triggers are to be managed. And now that I know that not getting results that I want are a trigger, I can more easily let them go. And I can remind myself that it is about the journey. It's not always about the results. Although, I talk about personal vision and we are going for a result. Obviously, I have a lot of grief and I have trauma. There's lots of other videos that talk about how to process these things. But it's important that you separate them. And in my current hopelessness, it was not about my grief, but my grief was enmeshing itself in it, okay? And so remembering to separate that grief, separate that trauma, so that you can work on the real issue, which is my negative self-talk, which we do have 100% control of. But it's hard to have control of that negative thought if you don't know all of this stuff underneath, right? So my negative thought in my hopelessness a couple days ago is hard work does not equal success, right? You can see that in, my experience with Derp. But there's lots of things in my life that I've been successful with. I've been successful with my finances. I've been successful with my education. And I've been successful in lots of relationships. So that's not a true statement, but it is what I begin to think about so much that I believe it, and then I feel hopeless. So going through this process, the power of choice here is to replace this with hard work doesn't always get me the results that I want, but hard work does move me forward. So you see how I can replace that with a very true, realistic statement. Because oftentimes people take a negative thought and they try to replace it with the opposite. Hard work equals success. Well, my life has not shown that in every instance, right? And I need to manage my expectations, and I need to embrace the journey that I'm currently on. And so just replacing a negative thought with the opposite positive thought does not always help, especially if it's not realistic. And so I am choosing to replace that negative thought with, I am on a journey, and I am going to continue to work hard on this journey, and I might not get exactly the results that I want, but I will look for the positives. See how that's different? And this is something I learned in myself just in this last 3 days. So your journey, when I say embrace the journey, and that's the name of my podcast, we are all on a mental health journey. We are all on a life journey. And this is your story. And it's not all bad. No matter what you feel today, no matter how hopeless you feel, it's not all bad. And if you look at my life and you just focus on the bad, it looks pretty darn bad, pretty darn painful. So I have to make a conscious effort to find the good. Some other categories that came up in this map is injustice. And recently, someone I care for very much, and they have had a lot of grief and trauma in their life, lost their sister. Their sister died. And it's not my grief, and so I have to make sure I don't take on someone else's grief. But it does remind me of the injustice, that hardships don't seem to be evenly distributed. And that might be your story. And that might be why you feel hopeless. But I want you to take these categories and put that injustice in its own category. Because unfortunately, there are things we don't have control of. And injustices are one of them. Now, you could choose to be an advocate for the injustice that you have experienced. And I can give you an example of that. I have a friend who lost her son in a drunk driving accident. And she goes and she speaks to teenagers, mothers against drunk driving, and using her pain to fight this injustice. Me, on the other hand, people ask me, do you want to, get involved in Derp research? Are you still going to go to the conference? No, I choose to let that injustice go. And I choose to focus on people who are in pain to help people who are in emotional pain. That's my choice. So the injustice is, again, about a choice, but it's separate from your grief, your trauma. And what do you have 100% control of? Your negative thoughts. You are challenged today to separate the things that are causing your hopelessness, take control of the negative thoughts, and work out a plan of what you're going to do with those other categories. I believe that we all have this inner fire to to find a way, to find joy, to find love and happiness. But it might not be in the specific result that you were hoping for. You can do this. You are mentally strong. Continue to watch, especially if you have lost a child. Please go to my grief playlist where you see me on this journey of how to grieve over the last 5 years.